Don't worry, I'm going to get to what I believe 9800 X3D and Arrow Lake Ultra 9 gaming performance will look like based on benchmarks I've received. But first, I would actually be remiss if I didn't briefly cover the supposed launch of Intel's first Lion Cove product, Lunar Lake, and that's because it's not really out when Intel said it would be. Yep, I think this is essential to cover first because the oddness of this launch, Lunar Lakes, really should act as a solid reminder that whatever Intel claims, we cannot be sure that what they are telling us is even remotely close to what is actually going to happen. Intel told us that Lunar Lake would launch September 3rd, and then suddenly on Tuesday of this week, they reveal that it was apparently the pre-order date, which I don't know if I've ever seen this happen before, where a company claims a release date and then on that day says now you can pre-order it. This bizarre messaging is right up there with some of the weird stuff that went on while Intel was trying to launch Alchemist, and I've got to say that retailers that I speak with say that it is odd for them as well. They were genuinely expecting trucks to show up with Lunar Lake laptops on Tuesday morning this week, at places like Micro Centers or Best Buys, but they didn't. And ultimately, because of that, this just gives AMD another mulligan. And I'll tell you why. Now, maybe you missed it, but technically AMD's Strix laptops haven't been considered Copilot Plus by Microsoft until Lunar Lake's launch date. Now, yes, that does immediately come off to me like outrageous anti-competitive behavior once again from the likes of Wintel, but let's put that aside and talk about what's really going to matter here. And that's that it seems like OEMs besides Asus, Asus has basically had Strix exclusivity up until now. So people like HP, they're now launching their Copilot Plus laptops. And so now at Best Buys and Micro Centers, on Newegg and Amazon, there's going to be way more Strix laptops on the market than there were a month ago. And now, even if it's happening to Lunar Lake at the same time, Lunar Lake's not really out, and now all these new laptops, all this additional choice in Strix laptops has a Copilot Plus rating. Do you understand why that's really, really bad for Intel? Intel's been telling people for a while now, you can go into a Best Buy and you'll be able to get Lunar Lake on September 3rd. There might be some people who walk in and don't see any Lunar Lake laptops, but instead see a bunch of AMD Strix laptops and more than they've ever seen before. And that's going to be going on for weeks from the sounds of it. And that just will not be good for Intel's laptop market share. In fact, I am told by my contacts at reviewer websites and, reviewer YouTubers that the OEMs they're speaking to say that they won't be shipping them laptops for review until around the 20th or later. So this is going to be weeks of Intel claiming their stuff is out, and anyone who goes and tries to buy it will instead be greeted by a bunch of AMD laptops and more than ever before. And on the note of YouTubers who will review Lunar Lake, or even just people like me who wants to prepare and put time aside to evaluate Lunar Lake once more data comes out, this is very annoying for us. It's like, so when should I plan to have a day put aside to do this testing? We don't know. The 20th, the 24th? Does Intel even know yet themselves? I don't know, but what I will say now is that there were a few things that I flagged in this early Lunar Lake pre-review marketing blitz that I think people should be aware of while they get their expectations ready for the actual final reviews. And so before, again, I get into those Arrow Lake versus 9800 X3D benchmarks, I do want to go through those now. So first of all, I don't doubt when I look at Lunar Lake's claims that it will be more efficient than Strix much of the time. I can actually totally believe that. But I do believe that there are ways Intel's making this look like a larger lead than it really is. For example, actually, if you go to Acer's website, they're claiming battery life performance that is much closer between Lunar Lake, the X Elite, and Strix than Intel is claiming. And if you look at some of the benchmarks Intel's shown publicly, like Dota 2, I have to say, it's very misleading to show Strix boosting above 40 watts, while Lunar Lake is capped at what they've already told us it always basically will be capped at, and that's around 30 watts, right? Because Strix's efficiency sweet spot is around 30 watts, and a lot of their laptops are capped at 30 watts, so finding some model that's just boosting to 45 watts kind of seems like Intel's trying to make it look like it's using more energy than it normally would. I'm not saying AMD would win this benchmark, but I'm not sure that at 45 versus 30 watts, they'd really be gaining really any more performance. Second, I also want to say that I do want to see, though, more third-party benchmarks on games with more settings than the hand-selected settings Intel has picked. Because from what I can tell, they are simply very close. And we've seen a lot of launches over the past 2 years where one company cherry picks exact, medium versus ultra versus high on random little things. And then they are able to claim 10 or 20% more performance than they actually end up getting on average. When I look at some of the averages out there, even on like Dave2D, I don't know, it just kind of seems to me like they're pretty close. And were you to not handpick the settings, it wouldn't surprise me if Strix and Lunar Lake have almost the exact same integrated graphics performance. I want to see if that is how it pans out. But speaking of Dave2D, the person who's clearly been selected to be the Lunar Lake czar for the week, in one of his videos, this is a final thing I want to point out to people, you can see that he claims some level of pricing for a Lunar Lake laptop. It was an Asus S14, I believe. Now, notice that in that it says up to 32 gigabytes with a base price of $1,400. Okay, up to base price. That means that either the base model isn't getting 32 gigabytes, despite that's what he's testing, or from another website I looked at, it might actually be using a weaker CPU with lower clock speeds than the one he used in that testing. That, again, in many benchmarks, barely beats Strix. So if it's a weaker one for $1,400, is the model he's testing really competitive with Strix laptops that would be a similar price? Because if the base model is 16 gigabytes, well, you can find a Strix laptop with 24 gigabytes for hundreds of dollars less than the model he's testing. Or you can go a step higher and actually get an HX 370 laptop that comes with a dedicated graphics card. Now, look, I wouldn't personally be looking to pair an RTX 4050 with Strix, but the RTX 4050 can perform 40, 80%, even twice as well as those integrated graphics. So, were that to be a real consideration of yours, yeah, I don't know what the top configured model of this laptop will cost, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was actually close to one with a dedicated graphics card with Strix, or if you remove that dedicated graphics card, I'm sure some OEM has a similar thing that costs the same or less. So I don't see the pricing so far is that impressive with Lunar Lake when you consider the overall package that you're getting. And by that I mean, it's not that I don't love the idea of Lunar Lake. I actually love it. This idea of having graphics that are stronger than usual in an APU, and then just driving for the minimum amount of power consumption with a CPU that's snappy but doesn't try to do everything. I love the idea of Lunar Lake. But ultimately, let's be honest, you're really appealing to people that want the most premium browsing and good enough gaming experience. And those are people that usually gravitate more towards like $600 or $700 laptops because they don't need it all. You can get Hawkpoint laptops for under $700 now that, at least in multi-threading performance, is similar to Lunar Lake. And a lot of these laptops will give you like a 10-hour battery life or more. I don't know how many people are going to look at a $700 laptop that can give you, like 8 to 12 hours of battery life and go, yeah, I'm going to spend over twice as much for 30%, 20% more gaming performance, actually lower multi-threading, and slightly better single-threading, just so that I can have that another 3 hours of battery life, especially in a world where most of these laptops can plug into any phone power bank to charge. The second it pushes towards $1,500, even if it has a much better battery life, I imagine a lot of people are going to walk into stores and say, hey, for the same price, I can get like a laptop with a 40, 16, a 12, or 16 core processor. Why would I choose this unless it's cheaper? And that's a major concern I have for Lunar Lake. But anyways, those are all the things I wanted to say about Lunar Lake, since so much information came out about that SoC this week, even if it didn't technically launch this week. But that's my spiel on Lunar Lake. Now I want to, without further ado, get to Arrow Lake benchmarks I've received and estimate Ultra 9 versus 9800 X3D gaming performance. But first, an ad from a sponsor. This piece of content is brought to you by UPDF, an AI-powered PDF editor built for you to effortlessly view, annotate, edit, convert, sign, protect, organize, translate, and summarize PDFs across Mac, iPad, iPhone, PC, and Android. That's right, it's supported on all of those platforms, and just one license gets you access to using it on all of them. So whether you are on a MacBook or iPhone, Android phone, or a laptop, or just a gaming desktop, you can use this one license to use an excellent app that will summarize papers and articles for you via UPDF's AI assistant that leverages ChatGPT 4.0, which includes being able to use said AI to scan documents and make the text clearer and searchable for keywords. And of course, you can also annotate PDFs effortlessly as well and fill out and sign PDF forms that you download online and just, all those official documents you got to sign digitally now. This is an easy way to do it that has so much more power as well. With all of this power, though, it still costs just about a fourth as much as Acrobat. So for a limited time, Moore's Law is Dead fans get a special discount if you follow the link below. And remember that you are helping the channel just by clicking on that link in the description. I really appreciate, whenever fans support the channel by supporting sponsors that are making this channel's work possible. So support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out UPDF at the link below today. All right, let's just get right into the leak. One of my best sources recently sent me what you are looking at on screen. And as you can see, it is a Cinebench R23 multi-threading score. Now, at first glance, it doesn't seem that impressive, though, because it's only scoring 10 to 15% faster than equivalent Raptor Lake mobile chips. Although, it must be noted that this is a 24-core, 24 thread, so the max core count, yes, Arrow Lake, but it is an Arrow Lake HX, so laptop extreme chip that is limited to 120 watts. And so I don't think we should be 100% sure that this is one-to-one with what the multi-threading uplift will be for the desktop chips that will be consuming, as far as I'm hearing, possibly double the energy this consumes. Now, having said that, I do have to point out that anyone who says we can't read into this too much, that's actually what I said a year ago when I had very similar information on Meteor Lake, and a lot of people decreed that as being fake and too negative. There's no way Meteor Lake isn't any stronger than that, and it ended up one-to-one with how Meteor Lake ended up performing. Now, to be fair, though, I have been told today by a source that mobile extreme Arrow Lake has some performance inefficiencies compared to the desktop model that aren't just related to TDP. So maybe we could add 5 to 15% or something to desktop Arrow Lake. I don't know. I don't think we should assume that we can, but maybe. But that doesn't really change the overall point that Arrow Lake sounds 15 to 30% faster than Raptor Lake in multi-threading overall, and that's decent, but that's not as crazy as I think a lot of people are expecting. So temper your expectations. Now, what about gaming? Well, that's where this video will get even more interesting. You see, I've had an Intel source that for a while now has been telling me to temper my expectations for Arrow Lake performance. This has been one of the more negative sources at Intel that I've been talking to about Arrow Lake. And that's why in a lot of recent episodes of Broken Silicon, you've heard me go, I'm not so sure. Might not be as strong as some people think, although I think it's better than the worst case scenario. Well, this person, the more negative source at Intel, has told me Cinebench scores before now that entirely line up with that Cinebenchmark I just got from a different source. So now we have two sources, same Cinebench scores. I thought it would be time to take this person much more seriously and maybe extrapolate gaming performance. So if I put this quote on screen, this person tells me, Arrow Lake is turning out better than this person expected, but they maintain that it is unlikely to beat the 9800 X3D in gaming by any notable margin or really win at all. It currently sounds like marketing is going to claim a 15% plus IPC increase, which is what I've heard from other people too, but that isn't expected to perfectly translate into a 15% gaming uplift. Zen 5 didn't. And then also there's this clock speed regression from Raptor Lake, which again, I've been hearing from other people, but it's always good to hear this from multiple sources. So yeah, based on this quote, and then based on recent data from Tom's Hardware testing the performance uplifts with the latest Windows patches, not just on AMD processors, but on Intel, I think we can have some pretty accurate estimates for how Zen 5 X3D will pan out against Arrow Lake. Now, before I show you what I extrapolated on screen, I do want to be clear about some caveats. The first one is that I assume that Arrow Lake's going to boost to 5.7 gigahertz. I've heard that from several people. I think I've seen it elsewhere online. And that's then going to be divided by 6 gigahertz from the 14900K. And then we're going to multiply that by 1.15, 15% IPC increase, and we get a 9% uplift in gaming performance is what it looks like based on these numbers. Now again, keep in mind that this assumes the IPC will perfectly translate to gaming performance uplifts, which I'm directly told that it's not going to do. I'm giving Intel a huge mulligan here. All right, another caveat here. For the 9800 X3D numbers you're about to see, I assume that the 9800 X3D will clock to 5.4 gigahertz, and then I multiplied that clock speed differential by 1.02, 2%, because Hardware Unbox only found a 2% uplift between the 9700X and the 7700X on average in gaming. I decided to use hardware unbox numbers because, well, Tom's Hardware has all of this Windows Update testing done, including Intel and even 7600 X3D averages. So I want to use them as the baseline, but they got a more positive review for Zen 5. So I wanted to use the more negative outcome that Hardware Unbox found. Negative doesn't mean wrong, by the way. They just got different numbers through legitimate means. And I want to just use that to balance it out. Well, if we assume only a 2% gaming performance per clock uplift with a, that clock speed increase, we get to around a 10% uplift in gaming performance. And by the way, keep in mind that I think 5.4 gigahertz is a very fair number to go with, because even if at stock, let's say the 9800 X3D is limited to 5.2 or 5.3 gigahertz, which I think will be there at a minimum, because I've already leaked and it's been confirmed that AMD is going to have unlocked chips for Vcache this time. Yeah, I still think that means because there's full overclocking support, you'll be able to clock it to 5.4 gigahertz manually anyways, even if it's not there at stock. And frankly, let's remember too that I could see AMD binning this to achieve 5.5, maybe even 5.6 gigahertz. I have no reason to believe 5.4 gigahertz is actually the limit when I look at the boosting data from Gamers Nexus, and then look at the fact that there does seem to be room to bin here with overclockers hitting 6 gigahertz on multiple 9950Xs. So I think it's very fair overall what I've done here, that 5.4 gigahertz for the 9800 X3D, but let's only assume a 2% performance per clock uplift in gaming, between the 7800 X3D and 9800 X3D. And then for Intel, we're actually going to assume they get a perfect gaming uplift out of that IPC, even though that's unlikely, but that they can only hit 5.7 gigahertz. All right, from that, I got this chart you're looking at right here. And yeah, that's not a rosy picture for Intel. I think there's no way around it. Maybe the Ultra 9 285K will have an MSRP of $599, but I think it's far more likely to be $649 or more, considering it's using a far more expensive node than AMD is using for a chip that they are charging $649 for right now. So I'm just kind of assuming, actually being nice to Intel, that's all they'll charge for it. And I think it is actually going to be lucky to even beat the 7800 X3D, unfortunately. And then for $449, you'll be able to get a 9800 X3D that is probably going to blow it out of the park, maybe in a worst case scenario by double digits. And so there you go. There's no way around it. As problematic as the Zen 5 launch has been so far, and I've been very clear that I've felt it's been a disaster in multiple videos, it is clear that further updates and testing are moving Zen architectures, especially Zen 5, ahead of where they were portrayed in reviews a couple of weeks ago, as expected. And at the same time, as much as Arrow Lake sounds like a vast improvement over the not even an option anymore Raptor Lake, it doesn't look set to crush Zen 5 X3D in gaming at all. So much so, in fact, that, well, if you let me put this chart on screen again, if I assume that X3D actually turns out 5% worse than I assumed, and then I also project that Arrow Lake somehow gets a perfect gaming IPC uplift of 20%, not 15, let's assume even 20%, it still looks like it would slightly lose to Zen 5 X3D in gaming. So I'm sure some websites besides Tom's Hardware will have more negative numbers, but even if I account for that, I do not see Zen 5 X3D firmly losing to Arrow Lake at all, and it seems very likely to win. And actually, if I put this chart back on screen here, God, imagine if AMD launches a 5.4 gigahertz R5 9600 X3D for like $329. That would be an even larger clock speed uplift from the 7600 X3D, 13%, and I think that would likely tie or even beat the top Arrow Lake chip in gaming for half the price. Good luck, Intel. All right, that is going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to comment below for the algorithm. Tell me what you're expecting out of Arrow Lake and Zen 5 X3D. And then also please make sure you hit the like button, share this video. Sharing helps so much, people. And then also make sure that you're subscribed to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel and ring the bell button. That also helps the algorithm a lot and helps more people find us. And then, of course, if you have the extra money, consider supporting Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. For even the lowest tier, you'll get access to Die Shrink episodes. A new one will be coming out right after this video. They're always ad-free. They're just bonus, like 1-hour videos that never have any ads. And you'll also be able to ask us questions at that tier, and higher tiers get ad-free early releases of Broken Silicon, reader mails, free ones in live streams. There's a ton of content out there for those who want to support the channel. We cannot do this without our patrons. But for everybody else, if you made it this far, well, thank you for watching.